Hello and welcome back. I'm now currently talking about why I believe that the point system, or the 100-point scale, falls short. I stated in the last section of the presentation that the data and research suggests that formative assessment has a positive impact on student learning when compared to summative assessment. And the answer is, well, why? And the reason, or one of the reasons, has to do with the inherent problems of the 100-point scale that's utilized by most teachers in schools. Now, the first problem is that the numbers don't really mean what most people think they mean. As intuitively appealing as it is, just because a student scores a 60 on the first test and a 68 on the second test doesn't mean that she's really increased her understanding and skill by 8 percentage points, as much as we like to believe that that's the case. And the research seems to suggest that the reason why this is, why it doesn't really mean an 8 percentage point increase in understanding or knowledge, is because that who scores the test and how they score it seems to, or according to the research, affects the grade much more than the student who actually took the test. The classic study of this phenomena is when they would take 10 teachers, let's just say 10 science teachers, to rag on science teachers for a moment. They take 10 science teachers and they give them a test divided into 5 sections. And they ask the science teachers, please assign a percentage for each of the sections, multiple choice, short answer, essay, etc. Excuse me. Well, what was the result when they asked the teachers to do this? All 10 teachers assigned a different value to each section. Okay? You know, one might give 10% for the multiple choice and 50% for the for the essay, and another teacher might do the exact opposite. Another version of the study, the same 10 teachers were given a copy of one student's test and then asked to grade it. Even with the same percentages for each section, let's just say, for example, 10% for multiple choice, 20% for short answer, 50% for essay, the teachers gave 10 different scores. And the reason is because each teacher has his or her own personal view about what constitutes a correct answer, especially with short answer and essay questions. Another problem with the 100-point scale is the concept of the true score. Now, in testing parlance, I guess that the relationship between the score a student receives on a test and the student's true score on the test is represented by an equation that says true score plus error score equals observed score. In other words, what this really means is that the items on a test are assumed to be indications of a student's level of understanding, but every teacher knows that students often miss questions on tests for a variety of factors that have nothing to do with their understanding. They're tired. They were just careless. There was trouble at home and they couldn't focus. The list goes on and on. Okay? And it definitely becomes a problem, or it's a compounded problem, when we see that most teachers overestimate or underestimate the points that ought to be assigned to individual test items or to individual test sections. Now, these problems with the 100-point scale, these aren't new problems. Here's a quote by Edward Thorndike from 1904. If one attempts to measure even so simple a thing as spelling, one is hampered by the fact that there exists no units in which to measure. One may arbitrarily make up a list of words and observe ability by the number spelled correctly, but if one examines such a list, one is struck by the inequality of the units. All results based on the equality of any one word with another are necessarily inaccurate. You can tell they wrote differently back in the day, but the point is, it's almost impossible to assign points to individual items in a valid manner. Now, Thorndike uses the example of spelling, and if you think about it, it makes no sense to assign 1 point to each word, because some words are more difficult to spell than others. Right? And how can you possibly assign, in a rigorous and valid way, more than 1 point to a word? If gift is 1 point, then how many points are memento going to be? You decide to say it's going to be 3, but why? Just because you feel like it? Do you follow my point? It doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. What we need is a scale that can measure along a continuum for a given topic. Okay? And this brings us to the main point of my presentation and my suggestion for how to implement an assessment pedagogy. This scale can be adapted to fit any subject area. At its core, it provides a uniform method for defining what a score on any assignment actually means. Now, I have another presentation that's separate from this one that can delve into the details about how to apply this scale to real classroom situations. But right now, all I want to do is quickly cover some of the salient points of the scale. The first thing to do is to notice that it's a 4-point scale with half-point divisions. You could add third or even quarter points if you wanted to make it more fine-tuned and specific. But let's start with the 3.0 score. This is the target score that every teacher and student should strive to attain. And what it means is a student that scores a 3.0 on a particular assignment has demonstrated understanding of both the factual as well as the analytical information that has been covered in class. A 2.0 would mean that a student was able to independently complete work, but his or her work, to complete her work, but maybe they demonstrate their understanding with the easier information, but some of the more complex or analytical stuff isn't always accurate. A 1.0 means that a student grasps the simple and the complex, or maybe one or the other, but only with help from the teacher. And we've often seen this where a student might just stare at a test for the long time. If the teacher goes and asks sort of as a guide and a prompt, the kid can get it done. But if the student is left to his or her own devices, not a lot take place. They can't get it done. Finally, a 4.0 means that a student has demonstrated 3.0 level understanding, but has also made connections and inferences that go beyond what was taught in class. Now, I personally advocate for the elimination of the A through F scale, but by way of analogy, to sort of, as if this were to be an AF scale, to sort of translate this scale into what most people understand, this scale would define 4.0 as A-level work. And A-level work means a student has showed mastery of concepts taught in class and made connections to issues that were not explicitly taught in class. That's what an A means, and everyone in the school would understand that. And that's the standard to which all grading is held. On the other hand, a 1.0 would be a D equivalent, where a student can demonstrate understanding, but not when left to his or her own devices. They need assistance in order to get it done. They don't know it well enough to be able to do it themselves. Of course, a 0.0 would be an F, where the student knows nothing, even when the teacher guides that student through the assessment. Now, one thing about this scale is that it conveys to the student, the teacher, and the parent what a student actually comprehends and what a student can actually do with the information. And most importantly, in my mind, to my mind at least, it also can help offer a specific prescription for what an individual student would need to work on in order to improve. Too often we just simply say there's a general statement that's of no help at all, they need to study more. That doesn't really help the student or the parent understand what it is they need to do. Most importantly, it forces the teacher to analyze why a student missed a question and to work with that student to discover a way to help improve the student's understanding of the topic. I think too often as teachers we say, better luck next time, under the assumption that the score on the test is an accurate measure of the understanding. And as I've mentioned earlier in the presentation, we cannot make that assumption, especially if we want to call ourselves an academically rigorous institution. So in summary, the realities of schooling today mean that all schools, and private schools in particular, really need to differentiate themselves from one another. In my opinion, developing and implementing an assessment philosophy and pedagogy is both a unique and a more intellectually honest endeavor, especially if we wish to claim that we have academic integrity and rigor. I feel it's simply disingenuous to give out grades to students that are created by an ad hoc understanding of assessment theory, and then also that's subject to the whims of multiple individuals, especially when these grades can affect college admissions and scholarship awards. I've attempted to outline a way to achieve a more unified system of grading based on formative assessments, and I feel that the time for change is now. I thank you for your time, and I'm certainly open to any of your questions. Thank you so much.